Okay, so we're back with the world building stuff. Basically, I want to lay this out in sort of a way of we're going to talk about characters, but you need to understand the context of the way that the story is intended to be told in a chronological order, mostly, that involves really 4 to 5 main characters that all interweave with each other, and their stories will all be interconnected in a very specific way. Now, how this all starts is basically in a line of 4 brothers that are all of varying ages, and their stories all get told in a way that sort of lead into each other as they individually ascend and step down from the role of being Papa or Pope. So in the ministry, the role of Papa is kind of like weird. It's hereditary and like it's kind of like kings, but the power dynamics are thrown off in this era of the ministry specifically, because basically since the Satanic Panic era, people were really like closed off to the ministry as a whole, unless you were like really desperate and outcasted from pretty much Christianity in this world. Christianity in this world is very like the whole thing focuses on corruption of basically systems on both sides. So there is corruption in the Christianity of this world, just like in our real world, and there is corruption in the ministry of the Satanists. Because when you have power dynamics, that's ultimately what ends up happening. And also, even though that is sort of a focus and theme of what happens around the characters themselves more dive into like mental health and addiction and conditions that are put upon them based on this power structure that lead into what arises because of this system that ultimately doesn't work. So the thing is, the first Papa in this instance, who is still alive when we start this story, basically, Papa Narciso is literally called Papa Narciso because he comes from a line of literal narcissist dickheads, basically. He comes from like these power-hungry, rich, like uber charismatic, like like cult leaders, basically. It's like if you took every cult leader and like they kept having progeny and like you lead it down to this guy, right? So he's basically this really self-focused, self-grandizing guy who in turn has these sons illegitimately. So technically they're not part of the Narciso line in the same way, both because they're illegitimate sons and because they end up breaking the cycle of this horrific reign, basically, that Narciso has had for the last however many decades. Because the thing is, he starts this chain reaction of just causing problems for all the people in the ministry, not just others, but also himself, because he ends up in a position where he's not even technically in charge anymore. Like, yes, he's sort of a figurehead, and what he says still sort of goes, but really it's Mother Agatha who ends up taking control of everything, because she ends up becoming his confidant and right-hand woman, basically, and all she wants from this background of being, like, super poor and in this family that was very dysfunctional and very desperate for money, she wants riches. She also wants power. She is also very self-focused, but in a way of she wants to be in control because she had no control as a child, as a teenager. She was essentially a product of a very dysfunctional family that like abused her and put her in dangerous situations and gave her no sense of like autonomy and worth. So when she comes into the ministry after being like this wanderer on the streets, she comes in and sees how grand it is. And she sees how grand Narciso is, which is why she wants to get on his good side. They end up in this weird love-hate relationship where they care about each other, but in a way that's so built on, you have power and I want that power, and you have like what I need, that it's very like toxic and bad for each other. They're horrible people, and yet they stick together like glue because they are essentially the only people that sort of fundamentally understand that they can't really manipulate each other. They can't, well, they can, but not to the same degree that they are able to hold power over other people. They are like equals, right? They're equals, and they both sort of want the same thing, which is ultimately power and control and wealth. So when they come together and have this progeny of characters that are so different from them, it throws everything off, because the way that this ends up sort of culminating is the reason that Narcisso's first son starts breaking away from what Narciso is trying to teach him is because he goes out and basically becomes a normal teenager after a childhood of being so like strictly kept in the ministry and isolation and being like around these people who, yeah, they took care of him, but they're not really having his best interests at heart. And really, Narcisso's never around. And Mother Agatha is not really a mother figure. She doesn't want children. She doesn't end up having any children. She and Narciso are like this weird couple that kind of have kids together, but really they're just raising the next Narciso, sort of. So when Papa Omnia won, Francisco finally decides, I'm gonna go out and see, like, there's club life outside. There, like, outside of the ministry, there's things happen. There's bars, there's social people, there's like these groups of people who are outsiders, but they're not in the ministry. Like, I've been told that only outsiders end up in the ministry, like that this is a safe haven. Like, I didn't know that there was other spaces where these like misfits go, basically. And when he discovers all of this as like a 16-year-old, and grows into like a young adult, by the time he's in his 20s and is set to kind of take the next step in his role as a Papa Omnia the first, Franco is really having a different perspective of how his childhood was. And by the time he's in his 20s and he has these sudden other like siblings that he kind of didn't really grow with because they come so much later in his life. This is a whole like thing. Like, by the time he's like in his 20s, the next two brothers who are very close in age, different mothers, you know, stuff like that, which is, you know, kind of where I pull again from the Ghost universe of like, that's how the ages work there, technically. Anyway, by the time he's in his 20s, he's taking care of his like 7-year-old brothers. Because he's like, I don't want this to continue. Like, I have values now that are not the same as what I thought this all meant. Like, they're all of the brothers are sort of raised up by Narciso to believe that what they're doing is ultimately a good thing. And very technically, taking an outsider, taking an outcast, yes, that's a good thing. But the way that it's done in Narciso's case is a grab of power. It's, I'm taking in these outsiders, people who don't belong, in a way that now I have this society, like little built-in society that I have control over. And there's a structure to it. There's literally a sort of class system within the ministry. And it's like, Franco sees this and it's like, what the fuck are we doing? This is exactly like the people you're talking about who you don't want to be like, and yet you're just doing it in this other way. Like, he's a very smart individual, Franco, because he figures out that all this is going on, and he's like, why are we, like, this isn't what you told me this was. So, in his own way, he breaks away from this, like, horrible narcissist, comes into his own stuff, and like while he's doing this, it's very like he's like questioning all he's been taught, and like it's a very long process of being like, oh my god, this is fucked up actually. And then it progresses into his younger brothers, the pair who are like, I consider them kind of a pair because they play so much into each other, and they experience a lot of the same thing. As they grow up, they're seeing this dysfunction and they're trying to completely turn away from it. They're like, why don't we just leave the ministry? So they're trying to get out, and at the same time, they're discovering all like the club life, but it's changing because now it's like a different time period. It's like the 80s, and we're moving into like, you know, LGBT groups and like gay bars and stuff like that set up, but there's also the fear of like, yeah, what does this mean? Like, am I safe in these spaces? Because now it's like, there's tensions on the outside because the Christians and blah, blah, blah. And also the AIDS crisis, which I don't super get into. Like, it's one of those things, like, you know it's there in the context of the story, but I don't super get into it because, like, it's a part of history and, like, we all kind of know about it, so I don't do any sort of deep dive into that. But it's, that part of it is why, like, as they're discovering themselves out there, they're also repressing. So, Papa 2, Umberto, he goes out and he's like, you know, I have these, like, feelings for men, but I don't really, like, I've been taught that it's wrong. And there's all this scary stuff in the news and like scary stuff in these bars. People are like dying. They're talking about losing people. I don't want that. So the repression becomes so deep that he's like, I'm never having a relationship. I'm never like falling in love. Like I'm never blah, 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 blah. And this causes problems. He falls into addiction. He almost dies from his addiction. His brother has to basically swoop in and be like, no, you almost died. We are both quitting our drug addictions. I'm going completely sober. You're joining me. Like, we need to snap out of it. You're being ridiculous. Meanwhile, he, the third guy, Valentino, who's like, oh my god, snap out of this. He's been having his own issues because he's been like delving and delving and delving. He's been going around basically flirting and having sex with everybody because he's like, I just want to have fun. I'm just, you know, vibing. I'm taking these drugs. I'm having this alcohol. I'm partying it up. Woo! He loves it. And it becomes so much of an escape for him that by the time he realizes that there is a problem, and by the time Umberto almost dies and he has to, like, literally, he's the one that takes Umberto to the hospital while still drunk and high, by the way, and is like, we need to stop. This needs to get shut down right now. I'm quitting everything cold turkey. This causes him other problems because, yeah, he quits the drugs, he quits the substances, he quits the alcohol, but he still falls back into this worthlessness that Narciso has built into all of them, really. Basically, if you're not perfect, you're not even worth it. Like, how did you... Because Narciso basically wants them to be him. Think like Homelander and Ryan. Homelander wants Ryan to be him. So, Valentino just keeps diving back into sex as an escape instead of actually enjoying himself and having, like, a romantic relationship because he is terrified of commitment, but also he can't stop seeking out that pleasure because it's the only way he can get out of his own head and stop hating himself. So he's just like, I'm just gonna distract myself with sex, guys. It's, that's not really an addiction. It is. He just doesn't think of it that way because he's, still an addict. And then finally, when we get to the fourth Papa, Alessio, he's like got all these other issues. He knows who his mother is. He lost his mother at age 5. So he's one of the only brothers who actually had sort of a mother connection and loses her very early. So he's grieving the loss of his mother. He's trying to fall in tow with his brothers, but he feels so far behind because he's younger. And also he's born in the 80s, sort of. So he's well, the timeline is a little weird. I'll figure it out eventually. But in the 70s, Franco's supposed to be 20, and then by the time we get to the 80s, when he's 30, the two brothers are supposed to be also, it's weird. I have to write this out and make it into a seamless timeline somehow. But anyway, Alessio grows up in the 80s, so he's kind of taught not to show his emotion and blah, 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 and boys don't cry because, Narciso is a dickhead. But he's grieving the loss of a mother he kind of actually knew, whereas the other brothers never knew their moms. So he's in this weird space of you don't understand me because I lost my mom and you didn't have that, so I can't talk to any of you about it. And on the same token, he's kind of the least problematic. And I don't mean problematic as in dickheadery. I mean he doesn't turn to substances. He's very clean cut. He's very shy and kind of quiet. He doesn't really go out a lot. But the thing is, his problems are so internal that he's the one who really breaks the whole ministry apart. It's a culmination of all these things slowly coming together and pushing and pushing and pushing. He's the one to finally split it open. It's kind of like an egg cracking. All the brothers before are and then Alessio's the one to finally be here, we're gonna fix the problems. Because he's the one that's ultimately you know what? In the end, no. Narciso is on the way out. He's super old by this point. He's basically 100. He's this old guy. He's he's barely able to do anything anymore. And he ends up dead. Spoilers for my own thing. When he dies, Mother Agatha is so determined to take everything over for herself because, again, power hungry, narcissistic, greedy, horrible person. But Alessio is finally the one to actually stand up and be no, our dad is dead and you came in here and did all this shit and he's not around to vouch for you anymore. I'm Papa now. You're going to stop. And it's that moment of he also stands up for himself after years of just taking it, basically taking this abuse, and then having his brothers kind of be also sort of a little absent, but they're also the ones that are we're not letting you deal with this on your own. So it's a culmination of really, it's all four of them ultimately taking the stand and being we've had enough. Shut the fuck up. And mind you, this takes a lot. Even after Narcisso's dead, it's not immediately after that this happens. It still takes a while because they're so used to Agatha being the one to be kind of calling the shots in general about how the ministry structure works. Like, Narciso was so focused on himself and, like, his own shit that he didn't really care how the ministry functioned as, like, this little society. Agatha came in like a dictator and was like, this is where we draw the line. This is how we, like, categorize the different jobs and shit in the ministry. But eventually these brothers are like, this is ridiculous. Like, we're the ones that are, like, inheriting this, and we need to change it. And they finally, like, with Alessio being sort of the last catalyst, are able to make the changes that they always wanted in the first place, so that, like, during Alessio's reign, it's not like it was for them, because for them, like, being Papa was so mentally taxing, draining, exhausting, especially because Franco's first, like, big decision, which I'll get into when I talk about him specifically and delve into all of his stuff, his first big decision was, like, barely approved, and then when it does really good, Narciso is pissed. And, like, that's how all of this starts, because he does so well connecting the ministry to outsiders, like, outside people. Like, the Christians, of course, don't get it, because they're like, it's all Satan and blah, blah, blah. And, like, it's scary. But, like, the people who are out there and are already in this, like, misfit blah, 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 blah spaces, like, literally, they are connecting the outsiders to the group that's, like, a safe haven. Like, literally, Franco is the one to start that. Papa One is the one to start that intermingling. Because before, the ministry had been, like, this very secretive, very small, protective thing. Like, it started way before Narciso and all that, but it had started with, like, 5 people. Like, years and years and years and years and years ago. And by the time we get to Narciso, it's, like, maybe 50 people. But once Franco gets involved and really takes his step up as Papa and gets this approval and does this thing, he brings in so many more people than Narciso ever would have just running around doing sermons. So it's just like, it's crazy. I can't wait to get more into it. That's just me laying out the structure of how this works, because we're going sort of in chronological order, and then once we get to Alessio, there's also another character, Cardinal Crow, that ties into, Cardinal Crow actually comes in more like when Umberto was Papa, and kind of right before Valentino steps up as the third Papa. So Crow comes in, and they have a totally different perspective, and they're trying to help, and they're doing all this stuff, and then, you know, at some points we also go back and we see, like, the start of Mother Agatha's stuff, and, like, kind of a little bit of backstory on Narciso and how they met and how this all comes into play. So it's very, it kind of, I don't know, I kind of jump around all over the place with this, but it all ties in together, it all weaves and crosses over into one big thing. I still don't know how I would actually tell this story other than, like, through projects and stuff, like here and also online. I don't know if I would ever write it out. I don't really know if it would fit in a written format, because I, like, put all this work into the designs of the characters, and I don't really know. I feel like it would work best in some sort of almost film. But at the same time, so much internal stuff goes on that, like, writing might also be the only way to, I don't know. This is why I have, like, visual novel stuff in the back of my head too. But anyway, that's it for this time around. That's all I've got. I gotta go eat now, so bye!